Boston College lands a defensive end in the transfer portal. Again, a person you may not have heard of, but could play a big role in 2025.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider. Check out my work over at there. That's part of the 247 network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Now, BC has been active in the transfer portal. I teased it last time when Dylan Larnagin committed that there were going to be 3 more names to look for. And we're going to look at the newest commitment, someone who committed earlier today. We're going to look at that. We're going to talk about if the FCS focus in this recruiting class, is it going to work? And then some remaining needs as the portal continues to churn. And to do that, I brought on a special guest again. It's his second time this week. Usually does 2 times a week, but with it being an off week, let's have him in here to talk a little bit more football. It's Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited to talk about this guy. This is somebody that I found in the middle of the season, and I was thinking hey, if BC, next year BC is going to need to replace Donovan Ezaraku and Nidawak Pala, this could be a guy that could help fill that role.
So the guy that Mitch is referring to is Onye Nwosisi of Valpo. And Mitch is good with this stuff, but I would ask you out there, if you were to ask me, where is Valparaiso, what state is it in, Mitch?
I'm fairly certain it's in Indiana.
I knew you would know.
I'm gonna look that up right now. I'm 99% sure that's where it is. Yep. But yeah, it gives you really no. It's in Indiana. It gives you really no indication as to where it could be. It could be anywhere. But yeah, it's one of those weird schools.
Onye is a 6'5", 250-plus pound defensive end who played for Valpo for the last 2 years. He was in D2 before that. Has 1 year of eligibility remaining, and he committed to Boston College this afternoon. He was on a visit last week, talked to Bill O'Brien and the staff. I think the as you said, the idea of being the next Donovan Ezaraku was something that popped up when I talked to him. The chance to get developed like that, and he ended up pledging. He had interest from Iowa State, Buffalo, Bowling Green, a few MAC schools. So he had some interest. Mitch, what are your thoughts on Onye Nwosisi?
Yeah, this is a guy that is kind of the modern defensive end that teams are looking for. You 6'5", 255 pounds. You want that tall, long, lanky body. It's interesting. I believe coming out of high school, he was 195 pounds in his first year at Muskingum University, which is a D2 school. He was listed at 235 pounds, and now he's up to 255. And if you look at his frame, you could probably tack on another 10 to 15 pounds. He's just very tall. He still looks pretty skinny on film from this year at Valpo. And you can tell this guy is not, I really like his skill set and his physical tools. Now, obviously, coming from a D2 to an FCS and now going to a Power 5 school, there's going to be an adjustment period. And I'm just going to make a joke here. I almost wonder if Onye Nwosisi translates to baby deer, because that's kind of what he reminds me of sometimes, where he's got this long, lanky body, and sometimes he just doesn't know what to do with it. And you can see the flashes where he gets off the ball pretty quickly for a guy of that size, because when you're that tall, you have to, condensing into your stance as a defensive end is sometimes hard. And with his height, he is a little stiff sometimes. And there are times when I'm watching, it's okay, there's something there, but he just needs to he's a little rough around the edges, just to put it succinctly. And I think that with what we've seen from, and I think Donovan Ezaraku is a special case, but with what we've seen, how this coaching staff developed a guy like Quintavious Hutchins, where he wasn't really doing much the previous few years, was mostly on special teams, and how they really turned him into a competent starter. I think they could do the same thing for a guy like Nwosisi, who has these tools, has these flashes where it's okay, if we can hone that in and develop some of the more technical, nuanced traits of his game, he could be he could be an impactful player for this team. I'm not going to say he's going to be the next Donovan Ezaraku, because Donovan Ezaraku just turned in one of the best single seasons by a BC defender in the last 20 years. Look at guys like Luke Kuechly, Matt Milano, Harold Landry, Matthias Kiwanuka, like he's up there with this season. Let's not put him that standard, but he can be a quality starter for this team. I think if they can hone him in and start developing him.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his statistics from last year. He had 25 hurries, only 2 sacks, 2.5 sacks. But you look at what you hope for from the staff, and one thing that I've said all along on the show is that I trust the staff to learn. They seem very good at evaluating and developing. So I'm wondering if Jeff Commission, Tim Lewis, Bill O'Brien, they watched his tape and said to themselves, you know what? The physical tools are there. He's got some things. We can clean this up and make him a competent defensive edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking at some of his numbers, like you said, 25 hurries, a relatively low sack total. Watching the film, opposing teams are double team. Like it is kind of as Zaraku like, where they are sliding protections his way. They're double teaming him. They're chipping him. They're rolling to and away from it. And you can roll away from a pass rusher when you want to just not have him be involved. You can roll towards him because you're going to have 2 or 3 blockers blocking him so you can take him out of the play. So he is like, opposing teams very clearly saw that he was the guy and they were going to do a lot to take him out of the game. And if you look at some of his, more advanced pass rush metrics, and this is all from PFF, one thing that I thought that was very interesting was that, so PFF has this thing called true pass sets, and it's basically for when a team drops back to pass, the true pass set removes all plays where it's like a screen, play action, the defense is only rushing 3, or the ball is out in less than 2 seconds. So no screens, none of that kind of, no quick RPOs. So you're looking at real, true dropbacks. And when you look at those, Nwosisi's stats are really incredible. So if you look at his pass rush win rate, which PFF defines as, I believe, let me see, where'd it go? Percentage of wins versus blocking on non-penalty pass rush snaps. And that's a bit amorphous, but ESPN has the same metric. They just define it as winning in 2 seconds or less. So you can kind of figure out how it works from there. So in that stat, among FCS edge rushers who played at least 200 pass rush snaps, which is about 40%. So you're looking at guys who are starters and played a lot. He has the number 1 pass rush win rate at 33.8%. And for context, I think Dominic Zaraku's was about like 16% in regular pass rush snaps, and I think it was about between 20 and 24, I think, on true pass sets. So when this guy gets opportunities where he is one-on-one in a real passer situation against an offensive tackle, he is winning a lot. And obviously there's going to be a step up in competition going from the FCS to the Power 5 level. I will say a lot of his pressures came in 2 games against a D2 and an NAIA school. So he racked up some numbers there. So that's, we got to keep that in mind. But this guy, again, has shown the productivity and has shown the tools where he can be a very effective edge rusher and add some more pass rush juice to a team that's really looking for it going into this offseason.
In a later part of our show, I'm going to ask Mitch, I'm not going to answer it now, but previewing for later, does Boston College need another edge rusher? We'll get into that in a little bit. But next, we're going to talk about the FCS. BC has been hammering the FCS to fill out their transfer portal needs. Is this going to work? We'll explain why this might be a wise philosophy for Bill O'Brien and his staff in just a moment. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It helps bring together everything in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I used it to cancel services I wasn't even using before, and I've used and saved a ton. Plus, with their goals features, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Now, if you are like me, you also love going to games, you love going to theater. keeping yourself busy, Game Time is the place I go to because they are focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better. With Game Time, they have Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I use Game Time to get tickets to BC football games all the time, and I have had great success with their seat views. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You know where you are in Alumni Stadium. It's great to use. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here with Mitchell Wolf, and we are talking about the transfer portal. It's been transfer portal talk for a while. We'll get into the Nebraska stuff soon. If you want more talk about the transfer portal, about ACC football, check out Locked On ACC with Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, BC has a handful of transfers, and most of them are, well, 3 of them are from FCS schools, and I think there may be more coming. And you have one from Alabama and one from Ball State, who was terrible and just fired their coach.
And one from FAU.
And FAU, which also
was also bad and fired their coach.
and also fired their coach, yes. So they're going for either FCS or low G5 for everyone except for Dylan Larnigan.
I would say quarterback, generally when you look at the portal, I would say quarterback is very much an exception. Like that is a whole other world in terms of the quality of players you're looking at, the money they're getting. Like that's a whole other thing. So just kind of put that out of your mind.
So we're going to take Dylan Larnigan and put him on the back burner for this. If you want to talk about Dylan Larnigan, I talked to him for 2 shows.
We talked for a long time about that.
And I talked about him yesterday too. Yeah. So check that out. But we're talking about, we have Onye Nwosisi. There's all these new guys that are coming in from the FCS level. And the piece that I like, and Mitch is going to jump on this in a second, instead of going for Power 5 guys that are A, either too expensive, B, haven't played at all, so there's no film on them, or C, a combination of both, BC has been getting players that they have a lot of film out there. There's lots of ways to evaluate whether they're going to fit in this program, and they're hitting these. Mitch, do you think this is the right way to go?
I think it's just the wisest strategy for what BC is and has. And what I mean by that is that when you look at a guy like Onye Nwosisi, like I said, coming out of high school, this guy was, I think, like basically 200 pounds and 6'5". And that's for a lot of you, like, just look at that frame. It's like, okay, well, FBS schools aren't going to offer him because they just don't really know what to do with him. I don't know his full backstory, but, maybe he's late coming to football, so he just doesn't have as much experience. So FBS teams are going to ignore him. He even got ignored by FCS teams because they're not sure what he's going to be.
He was a wrestler, by the way.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's great for defensive linemen, and it's especially weird given his build. But anyways, so you kind of get why he kind of got overlooked in the recruiting process. And now that he's developed into his frame a little more, he's put on some weight. Now it makes more sense, and he's proven his ability as a defensive end again at the FCS level. So that's kind of one reason why you see a lot of these FCS guys get overlooked. Usually it's just like a size thing. And then they grow into their bodies, and then they start being productive. And for BC, I think this makes a lot more sense because at least in this cycle, because there was this big thing about BC's NIL program where they announced this big fundraising initiative, and they raised almost $2.5 million, and that's fantastic for BC. The thing is, that money, you're gonna see guys who are getting, like, so for example, Florida State's edge rusher Patrick Payton just entered the portal the other day, and he is a very talented pass rusher. Had a huge year last year, bit of a down year this year, obviously with how bad Florida State was. He's entering the portal. He's probably going to get like upwards of $5 million himself in the portal, and so that would take double what BC just raised for the NIL fund and probably drain their entire NIL coffers on just one player. And I don't think that's a wise move for BC because, again, we talk about BC. There's some holes they have to fill, and it's not just one. And getting an elite pass rusher is great, but I would rather them, try to fill multiple holes in the roster, try to make the entire defense better instead of just putting all their eggs in one basket with one player. So how do you do that? You're still probably not going to be able to recruit some of these other Power 5 transfers because they're going to be getting similar offers of money elsewhere. Obviously, BC is hard to get into academically. So you have to start kind of going down the rung. And so this is where you're seeing the group of 5 players, the FCS players, getting recruited up. And again, like you said, there's a lot of film on them, so you have a better idea of what they can actually do. So then you say, okay, we can envision a role with this guy. We think we can develop him and use him in a better way than he was being used at his last school. And generally, most of these guys have been solid and or productive at their previous stop. So it's not like they're, taking a gamble on these guys, or they are taking a gamble, but not like a crazy gamble where it's like we are just hoping and praying that this guy works. Like, no, we've seen some evidence where he can actually turn into a competent player for us and a guy that is a valuable contributor to our roster.
Right. And I think it's important to see too that it seems like it's happening more and more at other schools too. Like you may not see it at the big schools. Like,
No.
Obviously like what is it? Texas Tech right now is going on a spending spree buying every transfer they can get. But like I look at schools like Virginia, schools even some of the Big 10 schools. I've seen a lot of FCS school players coming in, and it seems like for those schools that aren't blue bloods that don't have unlimited coffers, as you said, this might be the wisest way to go because you can get talented players. You're not just reusing, guys that you just don't know what they can do, and you're getting a guy maybe with even a little bit more upside. Like if I was going to ask you, Mitch, like Onye Nwosisi, sorry, or a Power 5 guy that is on the bench, what would you go for?
I mean, I think it depends on where in the Power 5 because obviously, Northwestern is a lot different than Georgia.
Right.
But if you were to pick like a middle of the road program, like say like a Michigan State or something, where it's like had some success, had some good players. If you've got a guy that is pretty consistently performing at a high level in the FCS versus a guy at a middle tier Power 5 school where he's just not seeing the field, I'm probably gonna lean towards the FCS guy because again, it's lower level of competition, and when he has played higher level, like he hasn't been as good. But with the middling Power 5 guy, it's like okay, there are probably decent players above him, but if he's not playing at all, that's kind of troublesome to me. We see this a lot of when guys like transfer out of the big schools, and the schools don't really try to keep them. It's like okay, well, if the big schools don't really want you, then that should be telling because they're not really valuing your skill set. So yeah, I totally agree with this FCS thing, and that this is kind of the detriment or the drawback of the NIL and the transport and everything is like we are seeing the top level schools get flattened a bit where they're coming back down to the pack. The second tier schools are going up a little bit, and then everybody else is kind of moving up a little bit as well. But you're seeing the FCS and D2 ranks just get absolutely destroyed by the portal, which again, it's not really our purview, but that's just what's happening. So yeah, I think this is like, again, I would obviously love for BC to have unlimited NIL coffers and they could go get anybody they want with NIL money, but that's just not realistic with what BC can fundraise in the NIL era. Therefore, I think this is the most pragmatic strategy for them to try to improve their roster. And again, like you said with Bill O'Brien, his strategy is not going to be to live in the portal. They're going to try to develop through high school and
use this like free agency, basically.
Yeah, and it's like the draft. Like there are times when you like take swings out of position, and sometimes you just miss a few times. Like and then you're thin at a certain area and you just kind of miss. Then or you like need that extra guy to take you up another level, and
punter.
That's what you use. Yeah,
punter.
Yeah, that's where you see free agency / the portal become the better strategy because again we saw like with Florida State, like they lived in the portal this past year and it's a gamble, and they swung and they missed on a lot of players. We've seen Louisville have some schools can do this, they have it figured out. Louisville has it figured out pretty well, I would say. Like they are able to turn over the roster under Jeff Brom, and they've done it in back-to-back years. So that's some schools can do that. But BC, I don't think that really works as well. I think it does work for them to be this recruit and develop program, and then if there's a few cycles where they miss on a position or guys just aren't developing like the way, then you go to the portal, get a guy that can fill that hole, at least for the time being, and then give you another crack at the recruit and develop cycle.
And I think too, the other piece when we talk about NIL funds, it's like not all that money is not going out to buy new players. It's also used to retain. And I think that also needs to be talked about is that I think O'Brien's done a nice job this offseason.
Even Hafley did an excellent job of it. Yeah,
they both did. Yeah. Of keeping their own guys because they're not going to talk about it, but again that there's certain players on this roster that are getting phone calls. They're saying, hey, we got this deal if you jump into the portal. It's happening everywhere. I bet you Lewis Bond probably has.
We know what happened to Zay when he was here.
and Donovan Azaraku
Yes.
too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mahogany. Yeah. All these
Ozzy
guys.
Trapillo last year, I heard buzz about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening everywhere. So this money that you have also was used to retain the guys that you have, and I think that is if you're building a developmental program, is almost more important than going out and getting these new guys. You got to keep the guys that you have, and I think minus Ryan Turner, and honestly, given the way the world works, I can handle losing him. They really haven't lost anyone this offseason.
Yeah, if that's your worst, if that's like your biggest loss in the portal, your guy who was the 5th cornerback on the depth chart,
Yep.
you're taking that loss every day and twice on Sundays.
Right. All right. In a moment, there's still some needs left, and I think there's still some portal news to continue talking about. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to go over what those remaining needs are for BC in the transfer portal. What positions do they have that they need to get some additional help in? We'll get into that in just a moment. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with a newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black here. This is our Friday show. Next week, we got a busy week ahead of us because it is Pinstripe Bowl talk. We're going to have all sorts of discussions on that. I am still working. I might have the guy back from Locked on Nebraska to talk more X's and O's because we barely skimmed the surface on our conversation. Nebraska's a fascinating team. We talked about everything going on. We might have another episode coming up with that. But there's more transfer portal news. It's going to be busy. Check out Locked On BC on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, there's still some spots available, Mitch. And I keep joking about it. I think the biggest one everyone wants to keep mentioning, and we haven't heard anything, is a punter.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I know they have high hopes for Andy Quinn, who's coming over from Ireland. Would be a freshman this year. But again, I don't want to pin all of our hopes on a true freshman punter
from Ireland.
Exactly. So you want to let him.
You can't go back into next year with a new punter from Ireland and then the same usual suspects from last year.
Yeah. So ideally, they keep trying to find somebody there. I think you can feel decently comfortable with having some combination of Liam Connor and Luca Lombardo as your kicker and kickoff specialist. Like that's okay. Obviously, they could find somebody better. That'd be fantastic. But I understand if they don't really feel like spending money there. Other than that, I think a lot of people are talking about the linebacker position because next year you're going to be losing Cam Arnold and Joe Marinero. So you're pretty thin, and Sione Hala into the transfer portal. So you're looking at Davion Crouch, Owen McGowan coming back from injury, Bryce Steele, who's still a bit of a question mark, Jalen Blackwell, who missed all of this year due to injury, and then a bunch of redshirt freshmen, guys who really haven't played at all. So it is something we talked a lot about last year, and last year I thought it was very much overblown. This year I can understand it a little more because there are more question marks, and this roster is not as deep there. I haven't really dove in to see what the market of linebackers is in the portal. I think last year was actually a lot more robust, but I haven't done a deep dive into it, but I'm not really sure there's just a ton of linebackers that would be a definitive improvement lying around.
I could say too, from my perspective of just following along with what the staff's doing, I have not seen them connected with any linebackers.
Yeah. Okay. So then, and people are going to be mad about it again this year then. So that's fine.
But I can jump in too. I know we said that there's unproven. I know the staff is really high on Kamori Dixon, who's going to be a redshirt freshman next year. Okay. So maybe he's someone to watch for.
And again, we saw how much this group took a step forward under linebackers coach Dan O'Brien, and that Davion Crouch was a little volatile, but still quite good and played the entire season. We saw Owen McGowan play better.
Marinero.
Getting that out of Marinero was insane. So I think you're a little more hopeful with this coaching staff developing that position. Still would like to see more defensive line help, both on the edge and in the interior. Looking at the secondary I'm pretty good with the secondary as it is. Getting a ton of freshmen in there, so I think you kind of assume some of them are going to play a little bit. On the offense, I'm I'm more okay with what the offensive line is right now. I understand people are more concerned. I will say again, like behind quarterback and defensive lineman, offensive line is the third most valuable position in the portal because there are so few of them that are solid, proven commodities. So again, I don't think you're going to go and find a guy that is definitively better than a Dwayne Alec, and I know that's a relatively low bar, but these are guys that know the system. They've been here a while, so I think they're going to kind of want to ride with the devil they know in these situations. They've obviously been picking up a ton of skill position guys. I think they've rounded out those positions well. If they could find another tight end that's more of a traditional Y, I would be very happy with that. I'm not sure it's going to happen. And maybe Matt Reagan finally gets a chance to really prove himself. He just hasn't played that much. But yeah, I think most of the help we're going to see coming is going to be more on the defensive side. And like you said, ideally on special teams.
Yeah. It's been quiet, and I know there's one more name, and I don't know. We're coming out on Friday, so I'm not sure if it's going to be out there yet. But when that person breaks the news that he's committed, we'll be back to talk more about that.
And again, you said that the staff is doing a lot to keep things quiet. Like
I have not
until it's a done deal.
And I say that's a smart move to make because they're not negotiating against themselves, but getting out there that, hey, this guy's on campus, that raises red flags to teams like, oh, I don't know, Virginia Tech, who might then take a look at this kid's tape and go, oh, that's why they're looking at him. Let's get him. So like if I reach out, so just get you guys know with 247, when it's recruiting, I can go out and reach out and they'll confirm if a kid's there, if they want. Most of the time, sometimes they don't. With transfers, I get ghosted on everything. Like they will not tell me anything other than when they told me that the 3 guys that are committing. So they're keeping everything as tight to the vest as possible. And I had no clue about any of these visitors coming. I've had suspicions and I kind of know, but that's the way they're doing things. And it's okay. That's, I love to know about the visits too, but that's not the way they're working on this. So Mitch, we got to head out. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. I've checked out our work at Eagle Insider. I put up my scouting report of Dylan Lonergan, which I put scouting report in quotations because, again, there isn't that much film to go on. But kind of rehashing the conversation we had on the pod here, but putting it in written form. There's some plays of his from the spring game and his few reps of live action against real opponents. And then I'll probably be trying to get something out for Onye Nwosisi because I actually do have a lot of film. I'm getting a lot of film on him, so that's great. And then, like AJ said, Pinstripe Bowl next week. I already have the opponent previews for Nebraska out there. We'll have the matchup report coming out next week, so you can do that when you want to go nonverbal at the family function and ignore your relatives. So you'll have something to do there. And yeah, just make sure you check out all our work there.
And you can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I've been giving you hints and nuggets on everything that I know about. I'll have all the news about the newest recruit, the transfer that commits. We'll have that up on the site. Anything else that's popping up. I didn't write about it, but it sounds like BC basketball is playing UMass next year. So that's a thing. I know some people care about that. I don't. There's going to be more news. We just had Hockey Blogger put up a whole first half preview. We'll have the preview and the game recap of SMU and BC for basketball and a whole lot more. Make sure you check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast and hit that subscribe button. Last I checked, we're 19 away from 2,000 subscribers. I would love to get to there before Christmas. If you want to give me a Christmas present, hit the subscribe button on YouTube right now. Please, I'd love it. And for Mitch, this is AJ. We'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every